Hello, and welcome back to the Veteran Benefits Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Deming. Today we have a special guest with us, Thomas Roughneen, and he runs Citizen Soldier Law, which handles the DoD side. I think his firm does more than just that, but we partner with him on a lot of cases where the client's needs overlap with the VA side, which is what we handle, and service side of getting discharge upgrades or other litigation related to their service. So, Thomas, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about your background and what led you to found your firm?
I can, but first I'm going to say that I just realized that I was admiring your shirt, and then it occurred to me that it actually is camouflage. So that's pretty good for a veteran appellate attorney. What led me to the firm? Well, to be spiritual for a moment, I would have never opened up my own law firm, but I was kind of pressed into opening up a law firm because I was unable to. I came off active duty after a series of mobilizations as an Army JAG lawyer, and I thought I had a nice cushy government job lined up, and it didn't materialize. And I read a book called What Color is Your Parachute, which I highly recommend, by Dick Bowles, who's now deceased, but it's brilliant, and it's probably the most popular career book ever written. And I had taken a year of graduate studies at Johns Hopkins. And I was at a conference trying to find a job, and someone asked that question who was substantially younger than me. And I took the bait. I got the book, and the first words of the book were from Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And so I was unemployed at the time. You know, sometimes when you're desperate measures result. And here I am 12 years later.
Formed under pressure, creating the diamond that is your law firm today.
I had a daughter and a car payment and a wife who was working. I never thought that after, at that point, 17, 18 years of practice and prosecutor experience, defense attorney experience, homicide experience as a criminal defense lawyer, and, prosecution side, military and civilian settings, that I would be unemployed. But it was a humbling time, and, it led to this. And I really do believe that this was what the good Lord meant to happen. So lots of miracles, thank God, along the way.
Good. Yeah, and we connected, I think, mostly through National Organization of Veterans Advocates, where you've been a sponsor because of the connection between the work you do with discharge upgrades and kind of parallel serving military personnel with issues related, I guess, you do regular state criminal defense, federal criminal defense, as well as military defense stuff?
We get involved with federal matters, but we don't enter appearances in federal matters because my training was at the state level. So I'm admitted only in New Jersey, but the office has a staff across the country, really, and thankfully expanding. So for lack of a better option, New Jersey has very few criminal defense lawyers who are experienced in veterans issues. And so veterans are getting incarcerated with so-called bail reform. So as opposed to being able to bail yourself out, if you're thought to be violent, and of course the courts and prosecutors automatically assume that veterans are violent, it's almost like they default to incarcerating veterans. And so It's very difficult to get veterans out. So someone needs to really quickly get involved because the police are just locking them up and there's no bail, if you could believe that, in America. So
it's amazing to hear, because here in Florida, we have what they call veteran treatment courts. I don't think they have them all over Florida. I think they have them stood up in a few of the districts as kind of trials. And it's basically, if a veteran is convicted or charged with, I don't know if it goes all the way up to felonies, but at least a misdemeanor or something, certain relatively minor to moderate crimes, they go in front of this veteran treatment court, and there's resources available to help them, if it's drug and alcohol abuse or other things, kind of get them rehabilitated, get them connected with services, as opposed to just throwing veterans in jail. So I think it's a response to probably what you are seeing.
New Jersey was late to the game. We were probably the 39th state to do it. I was very involved with that in the Bar Association, and it just happened to come together while I was section chairman of the Military Law Veterans Affairs section. The president of the Bar Association just put his shoulder behind it. And the Bar Association has incredible weight with the legislature in New Jersey, so they were able to really push the ball down the field and get it done. And I just happened to be there. So it was a lot of work, but it was very satisfying. There's a lot more to be done, Rebecca. Mm-hmm. And oh, by the way, if someone's still watching, before they turn off your podcast, I just want to, without being solicited to do so, I want to just thank you for this opportunity. And I am so impressed, Rebecca, with your work and the presentations that you've done for National Organization of Veterans Advocates. So I'd be remiss in not giving you accolades for your accomplishments, and your presentations are always helpful and enlightening.
Thank you. I'm just really excited to have you on because a lot of what you do is sort of, to be honest, kind of a mystery to me. I know where the lines are, where our ability to help a veteran stops. We are very focused on the VA side and getting benefits through the Department of Veterans Affairs. But if there's anything related to discharge upgrades or med boards or line of duty letters, even I think you and I were talking about combat related special compensation, which is a branch determination, those kind of things. If it's anything to do with the military itself, we send those over to you. So I want you to kind of talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the discharge upgrade space.
It's a broad field.
What people should consider before they come to you, if
Yeah, I describe it as the flip side of the same coin. That may not be accurate because VA law is a monster in and of itself. So not quickly enough, I realized that was not my calling. And it's too much like being a real lawyer with lots of deadlines and, briefing schedules and the like. And the DoD work that we do obviously is extremely closely related to VA work, but there's a lot of errors that occur during service. And so they need to oftentimes get corrected. I didn't set out to be a discharge upgrade lawyer. In fact, I would probably have, God forgive me, had somewhat of a dismissive attitude about that type of work. But it just turns out that that's where there really is a real pressing need, because the military is not in the business of law. The military justice is an oxymoron, they say. And so many
I've
times,
heard military intelligence is an oxymoron.
Yeah, both.
Military justice is too.
Equally. And, there's a lot of great, intelligent, brilliant people who are lawyers in the military and commanders in the military and senior non-commissioned officers. But it's not their job and it's not their priority to ensure administrative processing, procedural and substantive due process, right? They have a primary mission, which is to prepare and fight wars, and asking these commanders to understand the intricacies of medical injuries and limited duty in the Navy and Marines, Army profiles in the Air Force, and Army profiles are the same. And Air Force and the Army use the same jargon. They just can't be expected to get it right. With every good intention, it's just way too much to ask. And I could tell you personal stories, which I won't bother you with, but JAGs don't even get the training on these military disability MEBs, PEBs, IDES. Even line of duty, when I was a battery commander, I really didn't have time to think about a line of duty investigation and form, right? I had 86 people who were trying to put artillery downrange, and I had my hands full with that.
Yeah, and for people who don't understand why that's important for the VA perspective, and that's the lens that I look at it from, is the VA perspective, is if you're in the reserves and something happens to you while you're activated, either during training or activated for deployment, then you could get VA disability benefits. But if something happens to you while you're in the reserves, but not during an active period, then you wouldn't get VA disability benefits from it. And so this line of duty letter, my understanding, is what kind of connects the injury to an active period of service. And if the command isn't really paying attention to it or focused on it, it makes it a lot harder to prove that your injury is service connected down the line.
And it can make it impossible. I'm pretty sure it was Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin who developed a policy that if you don't have a line of duty done within 180 days of the actual incident, then you're not going to ever get it approved. They basically put a statute of limitations on it for part-time soldiers, and so part-time military, not just soldiers, part-time commanders. So it was completely unreasonable. It seems to have gone by the wayside. I don't know that that memo was ever completely vanquished, but we haven't had those issues with line of duty investigations anymore. We actually just had a line of duty granted for a Air Force pilot in the Guard in California for cancer, which kind of surprised me because the Air Force is a tough, one of the tougher branches to get these personnel issues through. But yeah, the line of duty for part-time National Guard Reserve is a hurdle and not easily achieved, and certainly makes a VA appellate lawyer's life a lot easier when it's there.
Yeah. And the other reason why the character of discharge or the discharge upgrade is important from a VA perspective is if you have an other than honorable discharge, you, under certain circumstances, depending on the circumstances of your other than honorable, you may be able to get benefits. And that's something that the VA can look at, but from my perspective, it's easier if the DoD can just correct it. If you have a dishonorable discharge, it's a total bar to VA benefits, and there's just nothing we can do to help a client out until they've gotten that changed. From your experience, what types of circumstances have led to successful discharge upgrades or changes in the characterization of discharge?
So there's I think 3 bases, and I should have prepared exactly what they are, but there's an equitable basis, there's certainly a legal basis, and then there's just, I guess clemency would be almost analogous to an equitable upgrade. So there are some types of conduct that are not really excusable, right? You punch your commander in the mouth as a private. You get discharged and you get an other than honorable discharge, or you get a dishonorable discharge, right? There's 5 types of discharges. Dishonorable discharges and bad conduct discharges are only administered through a court-martial. The commander can give you an other than honorable, general under honorable conditions, or an honorable. And so if you suffer a bad discharge, bad paper, which is kind of more of a VA description, but you can have that upgraded by a passage of time, if you will, and just improvement in your character. You know, you become a fireman and you earn all kinds of accolades, and you apply for an upgrade 10 to 15 or more years later. We had a Vietnam veteran who served at Fort Bragg after his combat service, and he was a mental health patient, clearly, and he was diagnosed with it. So you had asked the question, or what are the ways by which you get an upgrade? The easiest way is to have the evidence. The Board of Corrections is not going to dig through your records to find evidence that's helpful to you. You have to present it. And so for better or for worse, that's why lawyers are kind of necessary, is because it's hard to know as a non-lawyer what the board's going to base its favorable decision. And if you give them too much, they're not going to take you seriously. If you don't give them enough, they're going to just reject your claim. So the board members, they're not professional adjudicators. They are temporarily assigned to review these cases. They're not lawyers, and they...
Active duty service members, is that who gets placed on the board?
They're either mobilized, so active duty military, or they're active duty officers. And many times they're retiring, so their careers are coming to an end. Many times it's senior leaders waiting for their next assignment, and they're in the Washington, D.C. area. Military District Washington, I think they call it. And so they get temporarily assigned to do these types of cases, and then they go become a battalion or a brigade commander or whatever the new job is. So it's not like you have an MOS of Board of Corrections Board of Corrections board member. You're not a judge. And one of the secrets And this is, we tell every client, you don't have to have a lawyer. If you can represent yourself pro se, we'll help you do that. We'll guide you and give you an opinion on what we think you need to present. We can't run the place for free, unlike VA where you get paid at the end and you can use your professional judgment as to what is a valid case that hopefully will end with a successful result. And we don't have the ability to receive that lump sum retroactive contingent payment at the end. We
Right.
tried doing that. Well, we tried running a charity for years with people promising to pay us when we got favorable results.
Is it a one flat fee for a certain type of case, or do you kind of do a case assessment and say, hey, I think I'm going to have to put 10 hours into this one and maybe 20 or 30 hours into that one? And
We do our best to estimate how many hours it will take to review obtain the evidence, right? So that's always a challenge, is getting evidence from the VA and National Archives and the various branches. And then we try to assess how many hours we think it'll take based on the number of records and the type of cases. If there's a complex medical case with numerous experts, right? You and I are using the same experts by and large. That's going to
we
cost
have
more
some
money.
favorites
Yeah,
for
we can
different
share notes
conditions
on
and
that.
different, yeah.
Yeah, happy to do so. Then the case will be harder. But if it's a simple case of a guy punching his commander and it's passage of time and raised a family, he's now grandfather, retired from being a fireman, let's use that example, lived an honorable life, then that's a fairly straightforward case. And really, with Google and search engine optimization, we don't get those easy cases. We get the cases where someone has complex medical issues, and I wish it wasn't
So
the case.
I'm assuming you're not getting the cases where it's they had it other than honorable or dishonorable for homosexual activity or proclivity during the don't ask, don't tell or prior
Yeah,
periods. Those should
we
be almost
take
automatic.
those cases. In fact, we've been getting cases related to the transgender policy and gender dysphoria issues. I don't know that we're Google's favorite outcome for that. I think you kind of get pigeonholed in Google pretty quickly, and I think Google's figured out that there's not a lot of people doing what we do in the area of post-discharge medical injury cases seeking Title 61 disability pensions, permanent disability retirement. Interestingly, if you'll let me digress for a second, probably the most famous and most senior person to get what's known as PDRL, Permanent Disability Retired List, after his discharge, President Grant fell on hard times, and he did not. So he's probably the most famous person who went through the Board of Corrections. And so
Wow.
he was issued permanent disability retirement, and presumably his wife received that after his untimely death. Um, I don't know all the circumstances. I get chills even thinking about that, but it was really nicely detailed in Ron Chernow's book on Grant. It's kind of ironic that that's the most. I mean, here's a four. I guess he was a 4-star, right? They had 4 stars then. It wasn't rank inflation
Wow.
like we have now.
And he wasn't getting
Yeah,
regular retirement?
I'm sure there was a negligible to no pension in those days, right? And President Grant, I don't even think the presidency had a great retirement benefit. So he made some bad financial decisions. President Grant, my top 3 presidents of all time, just no question about it. Grant, Lincoln, Washington, no doubt about it, are the 3 greatest ever. He's totally underestimated and unsung. And he was dying of throat cancer because he smoked cigars all his life. So that was probably service connected.
Yeah, I think there's
Actually, smoking's
some
not, right?
regulations where if they put cigarettes in your MREs, in Vietnam, I think there were cigarette packs
Yeah.
in the MREs, and you start smoking in service, or just because everyone else was doing it in peer pressure, you can't get service connected for tobacco related conditions. But we've had some where people smoked as a stress response to PTSD, same as
Yep.
alcohol and substance abuse disorders.
Yep.
If you
Marijuana,
smoke because
exactly.
of that, yeah, we've gotten connection for lung cancer and
I'd say General Grant had a lot of stress, and that
yeah,
led to him smoking
I would
cigars
imagine.
feverishly. Saving the Union, no big deal.
Yeah.
But a great book. His autobiography and Ron Cherno's account. So I don't know if that answered your question, right? There's equitable considerations that we talked about, like our firemen, and then there's just legal errors. So, when they blow it, we just had this Vietnam veteran. He was discharged, ETS, I never can remember what ETS stands for, but end of termination of service or end of term of service, ETS, end of term service.
ETS, yeah.
He had a profile. In fact, the doctor did him a great favor, and I've never seen this more than one-page profile in the old days. He had a 3-page hand written and typed profile detailing all the issues because this doctor said, they're throwing you out, and I'm going to do what I can to make a record. And he wrote out this exhaustive profile. So the gentleman received his VA after many, many years of appeals, and then he wanted to go back and get his pension. And so he had an honorable discharge. He was an airman injured at a radar station. They were attacked. And so he just recently was given his award and his pension. So he hasn't started collecting it. And now he wants combat-related special compensation because we think he deserves that. And the Air Force is actually saying no, because we asked for it in the petition, in the application, because he had a motorcycle accident. And so I guess they're saying that was not line of duty, even though he already had the underlying mental health issues. So we'll see how it goes. So I hope that answers your question.
Combat-related special compensation is something we get a lot of questions on because the branch of service has to determine whether or not an injury is related to combat or training for combat. And then if they determine that, then you get to choose. It really only applies if you're getting retirement pay, right?
Right.
And then you get the portion that you waive in favor of getting VA disability, you get put back as a tax-free benefit as opposed to under the regular concurrent retirement disability pay, you'd have to pay taxes on that amount of retirement pay. So it can really make the amount of pay subject to taxes significantly lower.
And it's based on it's a condition, medical condition by medical condition basis. So you get it prorated. So you might be 30% CRSC tax-free, and the rest of it would be taxable if they don't find that your injury was caused by an instrumentality of war or direct combat consequences. So you can get behavioral health for like being in the area of artillery rounds, but it's got to be like, let's just use the example, a military sexual trauma in a combat zone. That's not combat related special compensation. So that's a different consideration, for example. I think that's the easiest way to really make the distinction, right? It's terrible, it's awful, it's heinous. It happened in a combat zone, but it's not an instrumentality of war, so to speak. It's an instrumentality of violence, obviously, but it's not war.
You could still get your VA disability for it. You could still get medical retirement for it, but you can't get that CRSC, the combat-related special compensation.
Now, if your mental health issues are a combination of your military sexual trauma, but you really can't rely on that, you have to rely on the fact that you are also subject to combat, right? You might not have been a very specific PTSD stressor, but you can bootstrap combat-related special compensation, and we have actual instrumentality or combat.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I was never in the military, but I went down I lived in Afghanistan for a year alongside the military. And some of the most stressful things that happened down there were coworker related. I was there during the surge in 2011, and I think they kind of scraped the bottom of the barrel of the volunteers willing to go over to Afghanistan, and we had some interesting people over there. But it was that stress of dealing with the coworkers on top of the fact that every time you went outside the wire, you could get blown up, that made the stress of dealing with those coworkers 10x what it would have been if you were just in a regular office setting.
And what do they call it? Green on blue? I don't know. I forget what blue on green when supposed Allied forces working in your office building. Got to keep an eye on the guy. in the next cubicle over since they're slaughtering Americans. So, yeah, I mean that mental health, if you document that mental health development, mental health injury diagnosis as a result of working in that environment, certainly if you're in the close proximity to an attack like that, that's going to get you CRSC. Arguably, if your diagnosis is that you were affected by it, but you weren't even in the immediate proximity, you have I think, an arguable chance of getting combat-related special compensation. It's an individual diagnosis.
You think it's different from? Are you noticing a difference in grant rates between the different branches of service? Like, is Air Force more likely or Navy more likely, or is it fairly consistent or fairly inconsistent across the board?
We've never really looked at that. I will tell you that the system is completely overwhelmed. And so when you're seeking relief from the Board of Corrections or the Discharge Review Board, depending, irrespective of the service, maybe the Coast Guard is getting them decided quickly, but no other branch. I mean, we've had it. We just won a case not too long ago this year for a fellow who deployed 3 times, and he should have received a higher rating for his IDES. It took 2.5 years. He had gone by himself. He was a law school graduate, but he didn't get admitted to the bar. And so I guess he thought he would be successful. He wasn't. I think he might have even tried again, and then he contacted us. And so you can imagine the amount of time it took for him to go to the board twice, get rejected, and then we filed, and it took 2.5 years before they gave him that retroactive increase to his rating.
So are you able to file appeals if you get a bad decision, or you just refile it for second consideration with additional evidence, or what's the process if somebody gets a denial on?
So if you have new evidence, you can file a reconsideration, and that's a loosely defined category of evidence. You might just get an expert or get another expert. So they don't even say anything about duplicative evidence, So you certainly have some advantages, I think, with a reconsideration. And so it's also important to point out that they're not the be-all, end-all at the Board of Corrections. You can still take that decision, if it's unfavorable, into the Federal Court of Claims, where you get a Article 3 black-robed judge to make a decision with a pair or a couple law clerks making decisions, the drafts of decisions with research in a very, it's a prestigious job to be a Federal Court of Claims law clerk. So you're getting, I think, a good caliber of lawyer. And then the judges, they're presumably approved by Congress, recommended by members of Congress, and then approved.
And then you could go up the chain all the way to, theoretically, to the Supreme Court if you had something that they would grant writ on.
Yeah, in fact, there's a recent case, Doyon, Doyon, which is just fascinating reading. And it is an example. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled either 2024, time flies when you're having fun, so it might have even been 2023, but it is exactly that, where you had an injured sailor, Navy, and he was denied relief. The case made its way up and down the courts. I think it was remanded back to the Board of Corrections. The Board of Corrections refused to grant relief. It went back to the Federal Court of Claims, and then it would have, I think, goes to the district court judge, but ultimately it made its way to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, who finally ruled and awarded. I don't even think they remanded it for relief. I think they actually determined that Mr. Doyon earned his disability pension for whatever conditions that it was, I'm sure, behavioral health case, and he prevailed finally at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. But you can imagine how many years that took.
Yeah. Well, to me, that says it's really important to have, I mean, maybe for certain complex cases, maybe not for every case, but to have a lawyer on your side figuring out, okay, should we just refile with new evidence or request reconsideration with new evidence, or is this something that they got wrong and we need legal arguments and take it through the formal court appeal system?
The issue is, as you have articulated, there's a statute of limitations as well. There's certain cases that you can run out of time and you'll be barred from filing with the federal court of claims. So yeah, you don't want to go back to the Board of Corrections too many times because you may burn out burn the clock, if you will, and eliminate your ability to go get relief in a Article 3, real judge jurisdiction.
Yeah, I know some of the clients I've talked to who might need help with, or, clients or potential clients that might need help with discharge issues, because, we work on contingency fee, there's back pay if we win something. So it's nothing out of their pocket. And they're kind of like, well, I don't know, if it's, some of them are happy. I just want to hire an attorney, but some of them are, is it going to be worthwhile? And so we try to help them look, to the extent that we can, what are the benefits you're going to get? How much are you going to pay out of pocket? What are the risks of hiring someone? What's the chance of your success? And then what's on the table if you do succeed? Are those the kind of conversations you have when people are coming through the door?
Well, not only are they conversations that we have coming in the door, but a lot of our clients have already received their VA. Most of them probably have, well, I don't know about most. I don't know what percentage actually needed a lawyer to ultimately prevail, but a good percentage.
But I think, there are so many free services that help veterans with so many different things, that understanding that this might be an area where some of those free services might fall short. I mean, I don't think there's veteran service officers are trained to work on the VA side. I don't think any of them are trained to handle discharge upgrades or anything like that. There might be some law school clinics, and if you get lucky or have a super interesting case and they have the bandwidth, but then you're getting handed off from law student to law student, depending on how the clinic is set up. I just don't think there are free resources out there. And if there are, they're not at the same caliber as a dedicated law firm and a dedicated attorney who you have an agreement with that can represent you. I mean, not that everybody needs the attorney, not everybody needs a discharge upgrade, but I think when you do, it's worth the investment. If, you're looking at potentially having access to VA benefits or not having access to VA benefits, depending on what you're trying to get accomplished, access to the VA home loan, right? There's so many Reddit forums, and it's like, everyone's going online and, you ask ChatGPT, and sometimes it's a good starting point to kind of understand the framework and understand what questions you should ask an attorney if you do an initial consultation with one, and, figure out if one's right for you. Like you said, there's people that might have a simple case and they might not need to hire you, but they might not know whether their case is simple or complex until they have that consultation with you to kind of figure out.
Yeah, the part of the issue, I guess, which occurs to me by talking to you here is you can do it yourself, and then 2 years from now, you may get a decision that you don't like. And now you got to start all over again. And I just don't accept your records. I don't know that you have all your records. So we got to go start from scratch. We've got to go make sure we get the complete file from the military and the VA, because both oftentimes are holding separate records. So just to get started takes us 4 to 5 months to get all the records we need from the military. Unlike the VA, where everything is supposedly accessible on BBMS, that's not the case with the military,
Right.
And so I don't really practice VA law, so I can't be bothered with BBMS access. I'm waiting for DoD records anyway, so we just request VA records the old-fashioned way, and they gotta send them to us.
When we used to request them via CD in the mail, or not without the VBMS access, Veteran Benefit Management System access, which for people who don't know what that is, it's what accredited VA representatives have access online once you sign a representation agreement with them, and we can access all of basically everything that VA has on you, all of the records that VA has on you, within a week or two, definitely within a month of signing paperwork and getting that over to VA, we can access all of that. But otherwise, you're putting in a FOIA request or a Privacy Act records request. We used to wait a year, I think.
During COVID, it was easily a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So we faced that issue.
Yeah. Speaking of COVID, I think we talked about it earlier, are you still seeing a lot of changes in discharge requests related to people getting out for refusing the vaccine or other COVID-related discharge upgrades?
We are seeing a fair amount of COVID-related discharges. I happen to be personally very sympathetic to those types of cases, and we represented probably 15 to 20 COVID refusers. And anytime a lawyer got involved, they were retained. So it was unfortunate for anyone who didn't really push back. And I don't know how much pushing back would be successful. Once the lawyer got involved, it seemed to us, even in some of the cases, it seemed like there was no hope. We were actually surprised that the military would cave. All of a sudden, your medical exemption was valid, and they would leave you alone.
So you can get involved in cases before they've gotten out of the military if someone's going through
We were representing them during that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we work closely. We had the privilege of working with a lot of doctors, and a good number of the doctors that we hire we don't hire them, right? We recommend doctors. So if you get an independent medical examination, I'm sure it's the same for you, right? You just say, hey, look, this is a doctor that we recommend. We can give you multiple names, right? But this doctor has worked for us. And so we have a doctor on staff, and she was opposed to the vaccine. And, she was not advising her clients to get the shot. And so we took a strong position that you can't force people to take an emergency use authorized only experimental drug for something that doesn't necessarily make healthy young people sick. Yeah, so certainly that has died down, and now we don't really push for those types of cases. I mean, I've done some blogging on COVID related discharges and reinstatement. So it's a moving target, right? There's a lot of this goes back to the military is not in the business of recruiting or returning to active status someone with 10, 12, 13, 15 years, right? So there's all kinds of hurdles that have to be overcome. And there's no office in the military, at least that's effective. It says, oh, here's the door, here's the form you fill out, and here is the office you enter to get back in uniform. They know how to recruit from basic for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds from scratch, but putting somebody back in when someone else now has that job, right? There's only so many positions. There's only so many E7 jobs or O3 jobs. So all of a sudden coming back into the guard and saying, okay, I want my job back. Well, that was 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah, your job isn't there anymore. Yeah, yes. We've definitely had some clients ask us, they said, hey, I separated for whatever reason around COVID, because I didn't want to take the shot. And now I want to go back in. I heard they're taking people who refused the shot. Is that?
Well, they are. They certainly are. There's been, I don't know that there's been legislation, first of all, thankfully, but the more pressing guidance has come from a Department of War Secretary Hegseth memorandum on the procedures. It should happen with all deliberate haste or whatever the language is, but there's still plenty of obstacles for that. But, if you don't want to hire a lawyer and you want to get back in, certainly the easiest thing to do, Rebecca, one of the things, I'm not sure if you agree, but there's all these Congress people and senators and their staffs, man, you have got to exercise that tool, right? Press that lever. That is a free device by which you get a written accounting, right? The congressperson, the legislative branch can't force the military to do anything, but they get a reaction and they get a writing. Like tell all our clients, everybody I know, I never have contacted a congressperson on my own behalf, but there's really, maybe people aren't going to, your chain of command may not be happy about that, but too bad. You should be able to, we hold people accountable. So let somebody put something in writing as to why they've taken a step or not taken a step. So that's a nice free tool that people should use.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. From the VA perspective, if you get your it's never a bad thing to get your congressperson involved. I've never seen them push back or deny a claim because the congressperson got involved. But basically, for the most part, they're not, usually what I see is they don't get involved in the substance and the merits of the claim. Exactly. But if something, if somebody accidentally checked a box that the claim is closed, but they never made a decision on it, or something's been sitting for a super long time and it's not moving through at the regular pace that VA should be processing stuff at, getting congressional eyes on that makes VA say, oh, crap, we messed something up. We better fix this because we've got to report back to this congressperson's office, and we don't want them seeing that we're dropping the balls. So it can help unstick things if things are sticky.
I'm laughing because, throughout my military JAG career, they had speakers come from the Board of Corrections. So I remember one lady who will remain nameless. She came and spoke many years in a row, and she's like, hey, we know there's delays. You call this is the old days. Everything was on paper. You contact your congressperson. We're going to go grab your file, and then we're going to review it, and we're going to give a response, and then we're going to put your file at the bottom again. We don't know where it was. So, there's docket numbers. So she was hopefully exaggerating, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a consequence. So if your case is at the Board of Corrections, contacting your congressperson is not going to speed it up, I'm afraid. So don't do that. That would be the one exception, at least one of the exceptions to contacting your congressperson. And if you have a lawyer, don't contact your congressperson without letting your lawyer know. The reason why you hire a lawyer is we're on your team. We want to be your Obi-Wan Kenobi and you're the Luke Skywalker. But if you just go doing stuff after you hire a lawyer and pay us money, that's just not advisable.
Yeah, no, I can't tell you how many times I give clients that advice. And most of them listen. Most of them do listen. But, there's a few people that just, they get frustrated. The system takes a while and they get frustrated that stuff's working its way through the system, and I'll just send them this evidence again. Because in the VA system, the veteran can upload stuff, we can upload stuff.
Right.
In an ideal world, we're communicating and they're sending us stuff, we're reviewing it, deciding whether it should be uploaded to the VA system and when it should be uploaded to the VA system, and if it should have a cover letter and what that cover letter should say.
Yeah, of course.
But, I've had a number of times where clients just kind of get antsy and upload stuff on their own. And, we're dialing it back and trying to do damage control, and often we can with a lot of extra effort. Sometimes there's stuff that gets sent in that doesn't help their claim or that confuses the matters more and can't be undone.
We're collaborative here. We definitely want your input. I've learned after 30 years that the clients do know best many times. So they do know what the key information is. I've made mistakes when I discounted what the client's perspective was. I admit that. So I'm very receptive to client input. There are some clients who don't understand that there's a limit. Sometimes you have to be patient. Not everything is relevant, like you said. So you don't have to give them the bad stuff and focus. You can kind of minimize the bad stuff and accentuate the positive. So hopefully that's what we as a lawyer or any lawyer that you hire is able to do.
Do you do cases where a veteran's bad conduct, like you said, if they punched the commander in the nose, but that was related to a service-connected PTSD, can that, or some, they come back from a really traumatic deployment and they're struggling with alcohol and anger and drug-related issues or what have you, and they get their, DUI or in a bar fight or something, and that's what causes their discharge. Are those things that you guys are able to get into? Or do you see a lot of those?
Yeah, so, we don't know. It comes down to evidence, right? If you have a really good behavioral health expert, the 82nd Airborne Vietnam vet who received an OTH, he did some really bad stuff when he came home from his deployment. And they didn't give him an honorable. He wasn't looking for IDIS, right? You can't go to the Board of Corrections with a bad discharge, get a general, and then think you're going to get IDIS. So you have to get an honorable. And it's kind of hard to get an honorable when the military can give you a general under honorable conditions. So if you are discharged with an honorable, then you have a fighting chance of getting your Title 61 disability pension. But to have that bad misconduct, have a BCD, bad conduct discharge or other than honorable. That's I mean, the regs are pretty clear. To get an honorable, you really should have had honorable service. We had, it's very hard to get that honorable. We had a guy with 19 years and he just lost it. There was a suicide on the submarine. This man had he was such a meritorious case. He got addicted to drugs. He got addicted to prostitutes, and should have had IDAS. He was actually in IDAS. And the chain of command and the medical personnel at 19 years said, "Are you going to be able to make it?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm going to make it." He didn't make it. So he committed more misconduct. So they had given him an OTH, and he was able to only get that upgraded to general. So, he had the ability to go back. Sometimes you fall in love with a case, and I really wanted him to go back and get his pension. But he's successful. He's an accountant now, and he just wanted to have a discharge that said honorable on it.
Yeah. And from a VA perspective, general under honorable conditions is enough that we could start working on the VA case. So if that's the goal, I mean, I guess that's the question is, what is your goal in getting the discharge? Are you trying to get pension? Is IDEN for?
It's Integrated Disability Evaluation System. And then there's the Medical Evaluation Board, which is really not a board. It's a single doctor who makes recommendations on your case. And if you pass, that portion, and you're found to have a medically unacceptable condition or conditions, then you go to the Physical Evaluation Board, and they decide not that you have a medically unacceptable condition. The Physical Evaluation Board determines if you're unfit for that condition or the combined effect of multiple conditions.
So you're going through, so IDAS encompasses the MEB and the PEB.
Correct.
Process.
Yeah, so I went through the MEB myself after being in Germany for my shoulder. So I had a medically unacceptable shoulder. I had surgery while I was in a MEB. I was able to rehabilitate and go back to service. And then I just ended up doing my 30 whatever years. Kind of got murky there at the end because of COVID when I finally finished serving. But I was able to go through the MEB myself, be found. I don't even think I ever had to be found fit for duty. I never got to the PEB. This was before I knew anything about this process, right? So I came back from Germany in 2011, went through this process, and then I only learned really what IDES was. And it's changing, right? But at that point in time, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, most of the chain of command had no idea what a MEB or a PEB was, especially in the Guard and Reserve. And so I was never found medically unacceptable because it never made its way through the entire MEB process. I was able to rehabilitate with a profile.
Do you ever have clients come to you that's their objective? They go, their command sends them for a MEB and they say, I want to stay in, I want to promote, I want to, I don't want to get separated. Can you help represent people who want to stay in?
We do. I mean, it's the rare person. In fact, we have a soldier who had been found unfit, was put on temporary disability retired list, right? So that's an opportunity for you to get better. And it's required, frankly, for mental health, right? They want you to be able to have the opportunity to come back. So he did get found fit. He was really in bad shape. He ended up getting discharged from the active duty. He went into the reserve component. He was still in terrible shape, mentally and physically, and they threw him out. And he had a chance to have it all while he was in the MEB, right? He was in the MEB, he was in the PEB. He said, no, I want to go back to the fight. And they let him, and then he kind of blew it. I think we were unsuccessful getting him. I can't remember the name of the case, but I'm pretty sure we went to the Board of Corrections and they said, there's a presumption of regularity with the Board of Corrections. There's a presumption that the military did it correctly at the time. He had a lawyer. He received the advice. He said he was fit. He said he wanted to get back in the fight. They let him. And then the reserve unit ultimately kicked him out with nothing. And it's just hard to go back and fix it, especially when you have a lawyer in the military. So yes, great, good to go back into the military, but be careful. Because if you have your, what is it? You don't get two bites at the apple, whatever that means in the law when we talk about that, right? You get that chance to be disabled, adjudicated disabled and unfit. You should probably think pretty seriously about calling it a career, because there's just, financially, it's incentivized, whether they like it or not, to start collecting your pension. If, like, I'm a reservist, National Guard retiree, I'm in the gray zone. I don't collect my pension until I turn 58 or so, which is coming more quickly than I would have ever imagined. But if you get IDAs at 30, you're collecting your pension immediately. So you do the math on that. So you have your TRICARE for life, and you start collecting your pension, and you don't have to go to drill anymore. So who doesn't want that deal, unless you're really motivated?
Yeah, no, good point. I hadn't realized that you get the TRICARE for life if you get military retirement. That's a big benefit, even if the military retirement pay gets, or the medical retirement pay gets offset by your VA pay, because usually you can't receive both. And so
Right?
it may not always be worthwhile to.
Yeah, the TRICARE alone is worth it, right? I mean, assuming you're not satisfied with your VA care, let's say you're 100% permanent and total and you have care at the VA. I don't know how good VA care is. I think it varies from place to place.
It varies significantly from place to
Yeah,
place.
we have a lawyer
There's
in
some that are great, but
Massachusetts. The guys go to Mass General, and the VA is accepted there, and they're happy. I have a guy, retired colonel, who works here. He swears by it, right? But that's because he doesn't even use his TRICARE. He just does everything through the VA. So it just depends. So who wants to be dependent? It's nice to have options. So if you can get TRICARE for life,
yeah,
if you're a young woman or a young man and you can get health care for life, take it from me. That is $1 million benefit by the time you're all is said and done these days. Right? There's lawyers in New Jersey with a secretary and their wife, and healthcare is $65,000 a year.
yeah. No, that's definitely been as our firm grows, and I want to make sure that all of my employees have access to healthcare in some form or another. It's definitely been something that
It's a tough challenge.
it's been a challenge finding the right policy brokers, the right guidance from employment attorney, all the pieces to make sure that our team is cared for. And the easy ones are when they do have TRICARE, either through their spouse or through their own service.
I said earlier, it's hell running a law firm. We are underappreciated. You didn't know you were going to law school to understand how healthcare insurance and the various vagaries of that industry work, and the cost. Like, oh my lord, a broker. It's not like we even have to do. You got to pay a broker to do this stuff. I know I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, no, it's been a learning curve and a challenge. So healthcare for life is big. And if you're a veteran out there looking for jobs, and you can go to your employer, small employers who may not have these giant healthcare plans, and you say, listen, you don't have to worry about funding my healthcare. You don't have to worry about me being uninsured, because that's also a fear as a business owner and an employer, is having uninsured employees. And if something happens and they don't have coverage, and you end up losing an employee because they have
Yeah,
to deal with medical expenses. And so that's,
it's a big responsibility.
yeah. So from the veteran side, or from the employee side, if you can get that healthcare, I think it makes you a more valuable employee. It's easier to find a job if you can go to it and say, hey, listen, I already have insurance. I don't know if employers can discriminate based on that, probably depending on state to state, but it's definitely a benefit. Thomas, this has been really interesting, and I've learned a lot. Like I said, usually when we say, oh, it's something to do with DoD or Department of War, like we're sending it over to Thomas and his team. So I've learned a lot just talking to you today. Is there anything else that you want to share with people? Any thoughts that, and then I'll ask you how they can get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you? But is there anything else people are thinking about separating, or if they've separated and they want to reevaluate their discharge?
I think I've rambled on long enough. I hope it was helpful, Rebecca. I thank you for this
I think so.
opportunity.
So, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they have questions or if they want to reach out and schedule a consultation?
The easiest way is to visit the website, which is citizensoldierlaw.com. Um, there's a
And we'll put the
citizen
link
soldier.
in the show notes so people can easily
Yeah,
access that.
that'd be great. There's a band, a rock band, punk band out there with some military guys called Citizen Soldier, but that's not us. We're Citizen Soldier Law. So contact us if you need a lawyer.
Don't contact the band.
Yeah, they're out there. Apparently, they were successful for a while. And then we will review your information for free. You know, each morning the team gets together. We got a retired human resources sergeant first class and our intake specialist and and then another paralegal is usually on that call as well. And we basically assess the case. You know, a great number of our cases are types of things we don't do, right? If you're a military member and you need a divorce in Georgia, we can't help you with that. But we'll try and find somebody for you. So that's one of the services that we provide. And then we'll let you know if we can help you based on what you provide on that intake form. And we'll do that for free. We generally don't have the ability, what do we say? Free advice is not good. It's very hard for us to run a business and give out free advice. I tried that business model, Rebecca. It didn't work very well.
Yeah. But that's great. I mean, if people are saying, hey, I don't know if I have a case, I don't know if this is something even worth pursuing, they can reach out to you, get
Yeah.
at least a preliminary. I mean, you might not know the real answer until you dig deep into the files on whether it's a winnable case or not, but you can kind of help make an initial evaluation on whether it's something worth pursuing.
There is one thing I'd like to say. We are quick to tell people that you don't have to have a lawyer. We are also very quick to tell people when the government is supposed to give them a lawyer, right? And appoint them a lawyer. And we tell them that these government lawyers, that's what they are paid to do all day, every day. And they should be good at it. There's a really big problem right now because Doge has led to tremendous cuts. In fact, we're hiring a lawyer and a paralegal who are leaving government service. So you can blame us in a way for having poor response time. I'm not saying the lawyers that are there aren't good, because most of them are, and they're paid handsomely to do a good job. So we make sure every client knows you do not have to have a private lawyer. But worse than that, Rebecca, is that the Reserve and the Guard are no longer entitled to office in full-time military appointed civilian or military counsel. So as a result of in the last 2 months, there's been a command decision from somebody on high that Guard and Reserve who are injured, astonishingly, have to get their lawyer from the military unit that they are a part of. So it's kind of offensive to me, but that's going to be a
Yeah.
problem. And gals in the Reserve and Guard are not trained to represent you at a MEB or a PEB.
No, yeah. I wouldn't think that. I mean, the things that they ask JAGs to do across the board, you get such a breadth of experience.
Yeah, you know what? My friend
But
Tom
nobody's
Hagen.
in one command for very long to
Yeah,
really become an expert in.
I'll credit VA lawyers because I've gone down this road and I said, this is not for me. As Tom, retired Lieutenant Colonel Hagen, my Minnesota National Guard friend, says, VA law is not a hobby, Tom. So IDES is not a hobby. This is
No.
really
Yeah.
complicated stuff, really complicated because it's not only DOD issues. Now you're merging the VA into the process
Right.
because the VA is the record medical examination and they're the rating agency. So when they say integrated, you really have to understand both processes.
Yeah. No, and I've had people say, hey, I got my VA rating and now they want to put me through a med board. Should I do it or is it going to mess up my VA rating? And those are times where I'll reach out to you and say, well, let's have a deeper
Yeah,
conversation.
my view is like I'm not all about accuracy. Like I'm not interested in gaming the system. So if you have a rating, you should need it, right? So,
Right.
but that's up to you. But if you
Yeah,
have
I
a
mean, that's true. But with the VA system, there are so many bad examiners that sometimes people have fought for years to prove that their symptoms are as bad as they are, or that something's connected to service. And you finally get an examiner who understands that, and you get a grant. And then if VA was going to say, well, let's look at this again, or, we've got new evidence here.
Yeah, I will tell
I
you.
understand why people are afraid to have it looked at a
Well,
second time.
generally, Rebecca, the advice has to be if you are eligible for IDES for TRICARE purposes, but for pension purposes, we tell everybody it's really about accuracy. If you got injured in the military service and you're entitled to a military pension, you deserve that, right? And so the IDES process is actually very thorough. And so you can actually appeal your VA. You can do what's known as a VAR, a VARR, a VA ratings reconsideration within IDES. So there's a special office within VA, and your IDES lawyer gets to petition that rating decision within IDES before your discharge. So you have a very good opportunity to get a fair and accurate result. It may not be perfect, right? I mean, there's clearly going to be problems and everything isn't perfect, but to bypass IDES because you're concerned that your rating might be reduced, I think is questionable.
Okay. Well, I think that's good advice. I think, people are just afraid of the VA system. And it's
Get a lawyer.
It's a giant system, and
hire Rebecca, the pro vet law team.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for taking time today to talk with us. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I think the audience has probably learned a lot. And we're filming this, for those of you watching, we're filming this a couple days before Christmas. So Thomas is wearing his Christmas shirt, but we'll probably be airing it early in the new year.
Rebecca said, come with some personality. People don't like lawyers, so I'm trying.
Yes, we do have personalities. And that's part of the purpose of this podcast and some of the other social media stuff that I'm trying to do, is reduce the barrier to entry and let people know who we are and what working with us looks like, and when they may or may not need to hire an attorney.
Rebecca loves baseball and paid for her entire office to go see the Nats, and they won in a comeback fashion in the 9th in Washington, D.C. in September, even though they were way out of contention. So a great lady who loves to have fun as well as win cases.
We love to win cases. I think we have that in common.
Yes, that's for sure. It's what makes it possible. Couldn't do this if you didn't win sometimes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Thomas. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, Rebecca.